Maybe not what you said, you're doing it around.
He graduated in like late 19. What did you do? He's
going the other way.
I have so much power.
Miedo, abajo y balas.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us from wherever in the world you may be joining us from. Welcome to today's FringeCast, which is a bit of a FringeCast with a difference today. We have more live guests than we've ever had before, and we're kind of going to tackle a bit of a roundtable discussion, so we're really excited about it. So this is Parenting and Performing Arts, which I think we should start by doing a quick hello. So Daniel, are you able to send us live to the room?
Okay.
Hi everyone. I guess the first thing we do, I guess I'll be kind of chairing the event today, so if we all just introduce ourselves and say a bit about like what you do and your position as a parent. Don't think that's the right wording, but I'm going to go with it. I'm excited. So hi, I'm Alan, I'm the registration manager here at the Fringe. I am not a parent, which is why I shall just be asking the questions. Over to you, Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel. I'm Head of Participant Services at the Fringe. I am a parent of a genuine Fringe baby. I have a child who will turn 2 in this year's Fringe.
That was good timing.
Yeah.
I'm Jemima Levick. I'm Artistic Director and Chief Exec of Stella Quine Stage Company, and I am a parent. I feel like I'm an AA. I'm a parent, and my kids are nearly 3 and 5.
Hi, I'm Jude Henderson. I'm the Director of the Federation of Scottish Theatre, which is the professional membership and development body for the performing arts in Scotland, theatre, dance and opera. I am relatively new to the Fringe, and I am the proud possessor of an 11-year-old.
I'm Ben Harrison, I'm co-artistic director of Gridiron, and I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old.
And I'm Daniel, and I'm the digital marketing coordinator here at the Fringe Society, so I look after all the tech behind the scenes on these FringeCasts. So if something goes wrong, it is my fault. So do let me know if that happens, if you can't hear us or can't see us for whatever reason.
Also, special shout out to Leah, who's also helping this happen. You can see her hand. There's literally too many of us in the space today. Daniel, can you let people know how they can join us and take part today?
Sure. So FringeCasts are a little bit unusual. So they're live streamed interactive podcasts, which aren't really scripted. So we just tackle questions that have come in advance or are submitted as we go along. We record these as we go, so you may be listening back to this in weeks or months' time from this discussion. But if you are with us live, you can fire your questions into us by just clicking the live chat button on YouTube. So on a desktop computer, live chat's in the top right-hand corner. If you're on a tablet or a mobile device, there's the button that says live chat. If you are catching up with us later, this live chat is recorded as we go along with the whole session. So if a member of the panel is talking about a resource online, I will do my very best to find that and put it in the live chat. So you've
never failed us yet.
I know, yeah. I could be tested today. Who knows? I will share that link in the live chat. So don't feel like you have to rush and copy it over or find it later. So you can listen back to this session whenever you want. But if you are watching live, we do recommend staying with us live. So if you ask us a question, you know we are tackling it in real time. Because there could be a situation where you send in a question that we know is going to come up later. So we're not ignoring you. We're just going to pick it up later.
Yeah. Glaze over for the moment.
Yeah.
Great. So we should probably just get started.
And that's how you can find the live chat button.
Slash Alan didn't press the space bar at the right time. It's an often occurrence. I just wanted to start by how we normally start these FringeCasts, with just establishing a little bit about who we are in case you're not aware. So we're the Fringe Society, which is the charity that underpins the Fringe. And that is someone closing the door quite loudly. So we're the charity that supports the Fringe. We don't manage it or program it in any way. We're very much the custodians of it, and we're very much there to support the artists. So Rachel, as Head of Participant Services, you very much look after our team and our remit of how we can be there and support people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that leads on quite nicely to how this conversation came about, because I think we, as a team, we're kind of very much there and we hold your hand from the point of you thinking you might like to bring work to the Fringe all the way through to making the most out of being here in August and hopefully having a positive experience and wanting to come back. And I think we became a strategic partner of an organisation called PIPA, Parenting in the Performing Arts, in the last couple of months, but have worked for the last few years with the existing partners of PIPA to think about how that support and provision of services for participants can be specifically tailored to support parents. Because we became aware that Fringe Central, which is a space we run during August, which we'll talk about more during this discussion, but is kind of the participant hub. It's the professional development centre for participants of the Fringe during August. I think we felt there was more we could do in that space, and that led us into a conversation with PIPA and with the people working with PIPA. Jude, could you talk a bit about PIPA and what they are, because they're kind of the partnership that brought us all together and to think about this particular.
Yeah, PIPA is a partnership. It's a collaboration across performing arts. So it's theatre and dance and music, and it works by bringing together strategic partners. Their vision is of a performing arts sector that is effectively inclusive of the parent and carer workshop. They promote best practice employment and support for parents and carers. They do some really interesting research. They did a big balancing act survey which looked at the experiences of parents and carers in the performing arts, which came up with some really, I guess, not shocking, but shocking / not shocking data around the numbers of people actually leaving the industry, and citing the highest number of people leaving the industry cited their parental and or caring responsibilities as the reason that they would leave, and that was even over and above people saying working hours and pay. So this is clearly an issue for management in the industry, to make sure that people are thinking more flexibly, thinking more openly about how being a parent or carer, having caring responsibilities affects your work. So Federation Scottish Theatre is one of the early strategic partners of PIPA, and on behalf of our membership we decided that it was really important to take up that strategic engagement, and we work with them on events like the ones that we'll be talking about later, and we help promote research and best practice, and help our members really engage with what they're doing and the issues that they're raising.
Great, thank you. So basically, we're going to have a big discussion. There's going to be lots come up, but the one thing I'd like to remember, like with all FringeCasts, is basically we have your back. We're here to support. Our contact details will come up at the end, but the email address participants@edfringe.com is a really good one to take note of, especially if you're new to this and new to the world of Fringe. The team that look after that can answer almost anything, or they can very much point you in the direction of someone who can. So if you take anything from this bit of the discussion, it's that there's people here. So if there's anything that's a stress, even if it's a tiny one, the Fringe can be a gathering up of tiny stresses. So even just to remove one by emailing us a question and getting an answer for it, please absolutely keep in touch. So to our discussion at large, the first thing I wanted to ask is sort of how becoming a parent while working in the industry, working in the performing arts, has sort of impacted or influenced your career. Jemima, I'm going to throw that to you first.
I had a feeling you were going to do that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it was a bit of a shock to the system, really. I mean, as it is for most parents, you know. And I suppose I sort of discovered very quickly that having gone from, when I had my first child, I was artistic director of a building in Dundee Rep, and I sort of discovered that rather than working kind of an average of a sort of 10-hour day, I kind of suddenly had to reduce those hours very quickly, and it was a kind of a rude awakening. I had to work more efficiently and in a smaller amount of time because I needed to and wanted to go home. And so I suppose just on a very basic logistical level, it kind of changed the way that I operated on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, I realised I didn't have as much time on my hands and I didn't have as much flexibility in my life, and that actually that little small person was the thing that I needed to get back to. And fortunately, when you've had a child, generally biology tells you to do that, so that's kind of a helpful thing as well. But just in terms of the work that I produce and the way that I think about the work I produce, it's really, and the work that I direct, I guess I'm more sensitive to those storylines that kind of address parenthood and childhood, and I feel very, I suppose I feel more responsible somehow now than maybe I did before about making sure that those stories are told and told truthfully and fairly, and I think that we have a real responsibility to young people to make sure that their lives are reflected well. But as with my sort of producer hat on as an artistic director, you know, I suppose, and particularly through my work at Stella Quines that I joined when I was having my second child, and I very deliberately moved from a building-based company to running a smaller scale touring company when I had my second child, because I realised that childcare was an issue and I didn't feel I could run a large organisation in that capacity in the same way. having 2 kids. Like, it felt like too much, so I made a very deliberate move. But since joining Stella Quines, we've done a lot of work with PIPA, and we were one of the early strategic partners as well, that we started looking at how we operated as producers, and how we talk to artists, and and how we find ways to support women particularly, but parents across the performing arts as well. So I guess doing it myself is the thing that has altered my perspective vastly. Not because I wasn't awful to people with their children, but I didn't understand. I definitely didn't understand what they were up against. So we had one of the actors as part of the Dundee Rep Ensemble was a single parent, and she had to finish work at 5 o'clock. She had to, because she had to go and pick up her son. And while she left at 5 or 10 past 5, what it was, I don't think I really appreciated just what she was dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and that actually when you get home, until bedtime, you're in a kind of a wormhole of childhood. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you don't. And I used to laugh about my old
wormhole of childhood.
I used to laugh about my old colleague James Brining, because he used to leave work at about 5, and then at about 8:30 he'd start getting emails from him again, and I was always like, what is that? And then I was like, he's done bedtime. The kids have gone to bed, he's back at it, and wrongly or rightly, but so I guess it's really changed my perspective, and it's by doing it, in the ways that we learn is the thing that has changed most of all.
That's great. That's something, as a non-parent, I was quite fascinated by, of the change of how you perceived what it would be to be a parent versus the reality of. So Rachel, you've just done your first Fringe as a parent.
Alan always jokes I'm a horribly honest parent, so he gets this unedited version.
I love Rachel's painting jokes, they're my favourite. But no, the thing of you've done Fringes not as a parent, and now done a Fringe as a parent.
Do you see, I would say I don't think I've really done a Fringe, but I think I have much more sympathy and empathy for those who are genuinely doing the Fringe as parents. I mean, I think, I guess there are two that, as I completely do agree with everything Jemima said, there's this absolute understanding of what it takes as a line manager and as somebody running a team to genuinely set up structures that support parents to be in that team. And I think the Fringe is a particular challenge around that, because it happens in August. It has to happen in August. It's, Fringe time in August runs from 6 in the morning through till 6 the following morning, and there is stuff to do work-wise throughout all those hours. And I think we as an organisation at the Fringe Society are trying very hard to be a flexible employer and to support people to be parents. But actually there is this reality, which is that a festival is happening, and you're on a hamster wheel to that festival every single year, and it's immovable, and it happens inside and outside of school holidays and all the things that means. So I think since becoming a parent as a line manager, I think I've been able to appreciate what you genuinely need to put in place to be able to really mean it when you say you're a flexible employer who supports. And I'm very lucky in that the Fringe Society have done that for me. We haven't tested in August with a child in nursery yet, because last August we were still at the end of our shared parental leave, so I had my husband at home with the sprog. But this year will be the first year. We started nursery in the middle of August. That was interesting. But this year will be the first year of being sort of status quo, child going to nursery, both in full-time work. So we're testing it. But I think what it's made me appreciate in a very small way is that as somebody who is, inverted commas, doing the Fringe from a fairly protected point of view in an organisation with a team and with a structure and with a very supportive employer, I think I have more empathy for what it is to be a participant, who are the people I'm here to support, doing the Fringe without necessarily having any of that. The people who don't have the existing childcare support, the child booked into a nursery full-time that I have in August, the flat with a spare room that I have an ability to stick my mum in for a couple of weeks if she's up for it to help out, and I think for me it's been about actually stepping back and being like, I'm in a pretty privileged position as a parent at the Fringe, but oh my god, I was broken at the end of the Fringe last year. It was overwhelming, and it was like the Fringe times 2 from my perspective. So what that must be like for performers and producers and people coming up to see work, I think I have a much better understanding of it as a result. So I hope some of the things we're trying to put in place come from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that you live in this, being a parent, becoming a parent puts you into this weird twilight world where work likes to pretend that children don't exist, and all your childcare structures like to pretend that work doesn't exist. School expects you to pick your child up in the middle of the afternoon. Hello, who in 1950 called it once its style back. You know, and so anything that we can do to try and make that a bit less the case by talking about what it means to be a parent. Your children are part of your life, they're part of your world, they're part of your work, actually. You know, particularly I think if you're making creative work, that's not my particular bag, but I know how fundamentally it shifts your vision of things. So you know, having a workspace that at least allows you to start those conversations and acknowledges that those children exist is really vital, I think. And so those of us who are in more senior positions in our own workplaces and have this opportunity to share that more widely, I think really there does feel like a strong responsibility on us. And I think I'd add it's not even just parents, although this podcast is focusing on parents, as somebody whose parents are very luckily for me, hale and hearty 70-year-olds. That's not the case for everyone, and as we get older that will not be the case for everyone. So caring responsibilities are sometimes not just for Christmas, they're actually for life.
I think the good news is there's been a big shift over the last 18 years. So I had my first child when I was 30, which was quite young, isn't it? It felt young at the time. And it was, and we were living in London, and there was a huge culture of presenteeism at work. I was working for a very prestigious theatre run by 2 single men, and it was the culture that you stayed late to show your commitment to the organisation. And I remember the kid's mum is a consultant paediatrician, and she was working 80 hours a week. I was working 50 hours a week, and we were trying to look after these 2 young kids. And there was one occasion where I remember for a 10-day period I used to hand over my eldest daughter, who was 18 months at the time, at the barrier of the underground. And that's the only time I actually saw her mother. I mean, it was crazy kind of rat race time, and I think it is shifting a lot. And I think I'm right in saying that Scotland's leading the way. It certainly feels like and maybe that's just a time shift from the 90s till now, but I think there's a huge shift in terms of, and certainly our company, and possibly it's partly to do with the fact that I'm a parent, is trying to address that. And I really echo this thing of the 5 o'clock finish. I think
I actually remember, Rachel, it's something you said not long after you were back with us. I remember you saying like how you couldn't believe how much perspective has changed about the importance of like actually 6 o'clock being 6 o'clock, and that's always like a thing that we feel very supported by, but actually something that I'm sure we've had a conversation where you said actually the perspective shifts and you realise you've got that tiny person that's the most
and
important.
I play a trick on myself and my team actually, which I'm about to reveal, but I talked about this with my husband.
I won't tell the rest of them.
Basically, we were working out who was going to do pickup and who would do drop off. And my husband he's a product designer based in Leith. He's very much, they do a 9 to 5:15 day. They never do overtime. So actually, he could have done both, but I wanted to do one of them because that's how generous I am. And but I wanted to do. We talked about me doing drop off because in some ways it made more sense. But I just knew that if I didn't do pickup, I would stay late. I needed. And so I sort of tell myself, nursery doesn't shut till 6, but I tell myself it shuts at 5:20, because otherwise I just let things bleed over. I'll do that last meeting, and I'm quite strict, so I sort of give the impression, I think, to the team that I need to leave on the dot at 5, otherwise there's a small child sitting on a step. He actually wouldn't be until 6, but it's something I sort of psychologically had to train myself into, and I particularly do pick up because I know it gets me out the door. Weirdly, I don't come in earlier than 9 o'clock. Anyway, so that wasn't a problem at the other end of the day.
No one works in theatre to
I fly brushing my teeth at 9:10. But
I think it's
and it's interesting that I, as the leader of a team, I needed to do that to justify why I had to walk out the door at the time I'm paid to walk out the door. It's funny, isn't it?
But there's a real paradigm shift when you become a parent. I remember Lynn Gardner telling me that being a parent is like joining the human race. Like when Maria was pregnant, it's absolutely right. I think, and the notorious example is Katie Mitchell, who used to work 10 hours a day. She was working on actors 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and then she had a child. And then the working hours changed. If you're on the outside, you can't understand what it's actually like to bring up small people. On the other hand, I think it was to echo what Jemima was saying. I think there was that quote, wasn't there? That the pram. I can't remember who said it. The pram in the hall is the enemy of the arts.
Enemy of promise. It was.
Yes.
Oh goodness. Yes.
Cyril Connolly, which I think is complete rubbish. I mean, it was written in the 30s, but I would say exactly the opposite. Because when I had the kids, my work started to echo the concerns of my children. So we do a lot of site-based work. So when my daughter was 4, I said, "Where would you like to see a play?" you know, what location would you like to go to? And she immediately said, a wood. So we did a show in a wood. And I'm now directing a new Fringe show, which is a piece called The Brunch Club, which is about, based on John Hughes' film The Breakfast Club, which is about 18-year-olds leaving school and going to college and trying to figure out what happens to the clique they're in at school. And Ella's helping me with the script, giving her speeches and dialogue. And she said, no, we don't say that. You can't write that. She's going to go, small commission. But I think staying in touch with the reality of your own life, they're not two separate things. And I think the key to happiness in terms of being a parent in the arts is being able to unfold the two things together, if you can.
Yeah.
That's all sort of, I'm doing your job a little bit here.
No, go for it.
And I think the challenge for us a little bit, and one of the things that would be really good for us to talk a bit about here, is the fact that in some ways, I think we're all lucky. We're coming from, backgrounds being able to work our way through it a little bit and have a bit of control over that. There is a certain amount of control that feels like it goes out the window during the Fringe. I definitely feel that. So I feel like I've got a pretty organised...
It's a very good segue sometimes.
I felt like I had a pretty organised 11 months, and the Fringe makes me nervous because I feel like it's kind of all to play for. And a little bit of me thinks that's not all right, and the Fringe started great about saying actually it shouldn't be any different for you as one of our team members during the Fringe, but I know it is different for everyone else out there as well. So how do we, and what is happening to enable some of the things that we feel like we're sort of starting to see improvements around the other 11 months of the year? Why should that be any different in the Fringe? Why is it different in the Fringe? We're doing a job on this.
Yeah, no, I would say, because there's one of the reasons I was excited about today was, so I've been in the position where out of uni, I produced my own Fringe show where it took over my life in every sense. And I can't imagine having to keep a part of my brain and self separate enough to be able to then look after a human. So yeah, I guess this is a nice segue into talking specifically. I know you've got a lot of Fringes under your belt. Ben?
Yes. Only since 1989. That's not too long. Well, I wasn't a parent in 1989. Nice to add. It's 100%, isn't it? I think a partner, definitely, a dad, a mum, a sister. And there's no way of doing it without backup, without support. It's just impossible. It's just completely all-consuming. Just as you know, it's the creation of it, whether you're an actor or director or producer, the marketing of it, the networking you have to do. It's more than 24 hours almost, isn't it? So backup team.
It almost feels like
or otherwise.
Physical time is important, but then actually that headspace and emotional space when you're completely invested in a piece of work for a month.
Yeah, of course it depends on the age of the child. We were talking earlier when we were about that magical moment when perhaps they're 14 or 13 or 14 where they could possibly go out and see shows on their own. Although Edinburgh is a very overwhelming place for a young person, but anything younger than that, and it's
and
bring back up.
Absolutely back up, and be a bit kind to yourself about how much you can give to one or the other. Managing not being a perfect parent and not being a perfect co-worker is the daily life of the human in that circumstance, and so it's kind of that cubed at Fringe, I would say. So if you know that you are going to be doing meetings from 9 o'clock in the morning till whatever, or if your show is going to be running, or if you have to be flyering, or if you know that there are people that you need to meet, and there is so much international stuff available, and meet the promoter events and all that kind of thing, even as a performer you may be involved in. Don't beat yourself up too much, and accept that the time that you spend, as long as the time that you spend with your child is time, it doesn't actually matter if it's only half an hour and you're just listening to them showing you about their Minecraft thing. That's much better than trying to be with them and also send emails. I think be as kind to yourself around that as it's possible to be.
I think there is a thing as well about just accepting that it is going to change, because I did the Fringe in 2017, and that was the first time I'd done it in 10 years, and the 10 years before, when I wasn't a parent, it was a bonkers project anyway, isn't it always? But I was producing Raven Hill for Breakfast for Payne's Plough, and I was literally in the Travers Theatre from 8 in the morning. We would do the readings, and then I would cast the next day, and then we would rehearse that afternoon, and I remember I used to sort of fall into bed probably drunk at about 11 every night, which was quite early at that, for Fringe world.
It's like Fringe evening.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone was like, what's wrong with you? Why are you going home? And it's like, well, I have to be back in the Traverse by 8 a.m. And it was every morning of the Fringe. Whereas when I did it in 2017, I had 2 kids. I mean, the show used to come down at 7:10. I'd be like, bye everyone, and just leave. And and I wouldn't, so there is something about going, actually, it doesn't work the same way as it used to. And yes, I can have meetings, and yes, I can bank up a bit of my day if I've got the childcare to do that. But yeah, I was much stricter and much kinder to myself, like Jude was saying, because I was like, I'm not going to go out and not going to be somewhere at 8 in the morning. And if it was, it was like, there was lots of readings, lots of things I wanted to see, and you just have to be really honest with yourself about what you're capable of doing. And I think I don't want this to sound massively patronising, because I don't think you have to be, my sister used to say that to me all the time, you don't understand because you're not a mother. It used to drive me mad. I'm like, I am capable of empathy, but there is something about going, because even when I was pregnant with my first child, I remember going, oh, this is not going to change me as a director at all, blah, 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 blah. No, I'm totally going to come back. And I wish I sort of hadn't said those things, actually, because actually once you've done it, it does feel different. And I think beforehand or whatever, you can sort of feel like that's a bad thing, but it's just not. It's like you don't have to be at every party, you don't have to be at every drinks, you don't have to be at every reception. The chances are you're going to get 1 minute of decent conversation anyway, so be real and be sensible with yourself, because the Fringe is like a year's worth of work in a month. It's insanity what we ask of ourselves on an everyday basis, but when you have a small person included, it's like insanity times 2.
It sort of feeds into information we give more generally. So when we do these info sessions in a general way and people say, what's your advice? My advice is always work out why you're coming, and then work out what you need to put in place to enable you to achieve that. And I think this is exactly the same advice, but it's also acknowledging what you are and are not able to bring to the table. So if your ambition is you're bringing your work up, you're absolutely looking for international touring, but you are also coming with a toddler who needs you to be at home at 7 o'clock in the evening to put it to bed because that's the way you want to work the Fringe, that's totally fine, as long as you make sure that someone within your team has the capacity to talk about your show and attend those events in your place. And it's the same advice really, as people say to me, I'm terrible at flyering, what do I do? Flyering's so important. Then don't do it yourself. If you know that you're not the gregarious person to be out there on the Royal Mile kind of selling your show through a flyer, as long as somebody else is able to do that for you, that's absolutely fine. So it's the more general advice in a refined way. It's thinking about what you want to get out of it and making sure you put the structure in place to enable that to happen.
Actually, to the words out of my mouth, Rachel, and I was going to say, it was following up on what Jude said, of actually having to take that time, having something that pulls you out of the bubble. Because like Rachel, one of my bits of advice I always say, when I used to do our media advice service, which people come when they're worried about selling tickets, or then they can kind of be in quite a stressed situation because it feels like the whole world at that point. And there's some people who the main bit of advice is, do you have the capacity to take a day off? Are you happy enough with your sales to actually just go to North Berwick for the day? Or escaping that bubble and getting perspective is really, so actually, if on the plus side, if you've got a small person who is there that you can actually give that attention to and escape the Fringe.
Who doesn't care about the Fringe.
Yes.
Small or a larger person at home who doesn't care about the Fringe.
I always remember my flatmate, socialist he is, gave me really good perspective one year when I was in the bubble of performing a show, and he was just like, when is this going to end? And I was a bit like, what are you talking about? I'm doing something really important. He was like, you haven't emptied the dishwasher, and it was that thing of like, oh, I don't think I should have emptied the dishwasher because it's the Fringe. But to someone else who's just like living their life, it's just a festival that's happening. And I remember, he's definitely not my child, but that perspective was, I'll never forget saying that. It was like a real reality check of like, oh, I still have to exist in the world as a human.
Yeah, totally. Kids are a really good tonic. It's like, when Brexit was happening, I was like offering to lend my kids to people because it was genuinely like, honestly, go play them to them for half an hour. They don't give two shits. Excuse my language. But they just don't care.
32 minutes on a parenting talk.
I told you I'd be first. But it's the same with the Fringe. It's just like they are going to draw you out of it, and they will be a really good tonic, and they might be really stressful and hellish and do something awful and probably do somewhere poo somewhere inappropriate or something awful, but actually it is just another world, and actually, so in that sense, it's a brilliant way to draw yourself out of that mad bubble.
Yeah.
Like,
It allows
it's
you to go
really
back and
useful.
go, oh, that's not a disaster, I just couldn't get the flyers printed in the colour I wanted.
Yeah, totally. And you know, the truth is that what I know it's important, but we're making theatre, we're making performance. Like, you know, we're not doing brain surgery. Probably nobody's going to die.
There are a lot of shows in the Fringe, I can't guarantee
perspective.
that.
Yeah, no, that's true. Some people might die, but you know.
Taking immersive to a whole new level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great, so that kind of leads on to a very similar vein, but we've talked a lot about the challenges in the Fringe, but I wonder if we could focus now more on like any sort of tips or resources that we might have to help ease that burden. Rachel, I guess Fringe Central would be a really positive place to start.
So Fringe Central, I mentioned earlier, is the kind of participant development resource hub during August. It is open every day. It opens this year, I should know this, on the Monday before the Fringe, and the Fringe starts on the 26th. So 26th and 25th, on the 22nd. Is that right?
Fringe starts on the 2nd.
2nd of August. So if
Yeah.
I'm counting back to the Monday from the Friday.
It's on the Monday.
It's on the Monday, sorry. We're not there yet, I don't know the date.
29th.
It opens on the, something like the
That feels
29th,
right.
I think. The Monday of week 0. Seamless. It's not
29th.
like I've done it for the last 5 years. 29th. Thank you, Jude. It will open on the 29th of July. Clearly nothing to do with me. And it will be open every day during August for the whole of the duration of the Fringe, from 10 a.m. in the morning until 8 p.m. in the evening. It has various services in there, including the arts industry and the media offices, if that's what you're looking for. But it also has a whole series of events that are free for Fringe participants to come and engage in. They range from discussions to workshops to inspiration sessions, and some of the ones in there are very much focused on supporting parents and people bringing work to the Fringe as parents, people looking for work, so the producers are in town shopping for work who might have brought their children along with them, anyone with care and responsibilities who is attending the Fringe. The key ones to be aware of, I would urge you to have a look through the programme when it goes online on our website.
So this is like an exclusive sneak peek of the programme.
Sneak
It comes
peek
out
of
in
the
I
programme.
think it comes out in 2 weeks today.
Exactly, thank you, Daniel. I also didn't know that date. It's amazing I have a job. But when that programme comes out, the key things to have a look out for are that we're running a creche. We've done it for the past couple of years, and we are making it available again this year. It's being run on 3 days during August, the 8th of August, the 15th of August, and the 22nd of August. And it's available for 4 hours from 1 p.m. on all of those days, so basically the afternoons of those 3 days. It is free. You do need to register, so when the programme comes out, there's information in there about how you register your child in for a place, but you can basically make of that what you will. If you so choose, you could go along to one of the accompanying coffee sessions, which are happening alongside it on the 8th, 15th and 22nd at 1 o'clock for an hour and a half. If that's what you want to do, if you want to put your child in the creche and then come and have a chat, various of us from the strategic partnership with PIPA in Scotland will be available across those days. We're going to get a variety of people who can talk about the Fringe, who can give advice, or who can just have a natter about what hard work it is having a small person or a medium person in the Fringe. So it's kind of for you to do, or you can use that space to set up a meeting, to go and have a business meeting on site in Fringe Central or off site if you so choose, or you can go and see a show, or you can go and have a manicure or a swim, or just lie in a dark room for a few hours while your child is looked after in the creche. It's totally up to you, but it's for Fringe participants and it is free. And the accompanying coffee sessions are also free if you want to take advantage of them. There are various other events in the Fringe Central programme that might be of interest to parents, and there's information about other resources in that programme when it comes out as well. So that's kind of one thing that's happening in August.
And I've just shared some links about how Fringe Central works, and that will be where you'll be able to find the programme in 2 weeks' time. And if you sign up today by following the link on our email updates, if you're on that mailing list already, then you will get that programme if it's out, or if indeed it's already out, if you're catching up with it. But if you're not, I will share a link about how you can sign up for those updates, so then we can send you that programme when it is available.
Thank you. The other thing to say about Fringe Central, and this links into, I guess, what we might talk about a bit about one of the challenges of the Fringe. Fringe Central is a breastfeeding friendly venue. You're really welcome to come in and feed your child in Fringe Central. You're welcome to bring older children in with you. If they're not eligible for the creche or the creche is not on, they're your responsibility while you're in the building, but we have high chairs, we'll have a changing area, there'll be a nice, quiet, secluded corner where you can feed if you so choose. We also stick a copy of a great book called Edinburgh Under Fives behind the reception in Fringe Central, which is basically a kind of a directory, a resource for all sorts of ideas, from cafes that are particularly good with kids to free cinema sessions to parks that are good, and it's broken down into Edinburgh area by area. So if you don't know Edinburgh and you know where you're staying, you can come in and you're very welcome to photocopy, sorry Edinburgh Under Fives if you're listening, but it's helpful. Or take photographs on your phone of the pages which are relevant to you, just to give you some ideas for what else around the city is there for you. And that is a great resource. I mean, Edinburgh, I guess, my thing about the Fringe, and particularly trying to think about things to do, it's very crowded, it's very busy, and sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming if you don't know where to start or where to find a safe space to feed or to change your child or to let your children run around.
I think it's the Fringe Central people will also be able to give you some hints and tips about places to go. So, for instance, if you're not familiar with Edinburgh, we have a big grassy bit called the Meadows, which is, yes, it's a bit full of jugglers, but you can usually find a small
most
space
of the Royal
to sit
Mile at
down.
that time of the year.
Exactly.
The description of Edinburgh in August.
Yeah,
A bit full of
there's a bit
jugglers.
full of jugglers. They may have the odd unicyclist, but they try not to mow down children too often. And so, assuming it's not freezing cold and pouring with rain, then you can hang out on the Meadows, and it's got a brilliant park actually as well. Very good selection of parks. In fact, many climbing frames are available. And if it's pouring with rain, then I would say the museum is the place where the people of Edinburgh are queuing up at 5 to 10 of a rainy morning. And that's on Chamber Street, so that has got space where you're a small person can run about, and there are buttons to press, and there's a whole bit upstairs where you can pretend to excavate things. So that would be my...
You'll be finding the bits of rubber they use for that in children's clothes for months to grow afterwards. I got nappy full of that the other day.
Yes.
Not me, my child. The other thing I'd say is that BookBugs is an amazing free resource. It's a bit like Rhyme Time, I think it's called in England, if anyone's listening from there, but BookBugs is a free session that happens in the libraries across Edinburgh. It's different days according to different libraries, but if you Google BookBugs, you'll be able to find one in a library near you. Daniel's all over that. And it's a free 45-minute long kind of song and rhyme session. You turn up, there'll be other parents there to commiserate with or celebrate with, depending on how well behaved your one is being that day. And it's a great space just to go and do something for a while.
Yeah, I think as well, if your kids are over 5, I think Edinburgh Under Fives is actually useful, even if your child is over 5, just in terms of just pointing in the right direction of things. But as you said, there are loads of museums, and you can get the bus out to Portobello and go to the beach. There's a beach in Edinburgh. Nobody ever knows that. I live near it. It is nice. You can go and have a wander along the beach, and there's loads of great ice cream and all the rest of it. So there are, Edinburgh is a big holiday city normally. We have hundreds of tourists all the time, and people are used to people coming to visit, but the Fringe is like that times 100. So I think just be prepared. I think being prepared and thinking about it a bit in advance and trying to sort of schedule your day a little bit, and part of that kind of looking after yourself, knowing what you're able to do work-wise, but also managing to. I always say to my kids during the holidays, it's like, if we do one brilliant thing today, whether that's just going to the beach and running around for half an hour, then you've done, it does assuage some of that awful parent guilt that lives with one for one's entire life. But even if you just do one brilliant thing, which is running around the Meadows several times and going for
an ice cream
and a bun afterwards, then that's a really good thing to do. And I think
Sounds like a great day.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my kids are a bit over the beach now. They're like, yeah, what else? But I think as well, if you do have little kids, walking around can be a bit stressful. But actually, even if they're not that little, we was just saying.
I was just saying I took 4 or 5, one of my own and some friends, which is even more stressful because they're not yours to lose. Trying to get through the crowds with smaller children or anybody who's a bit shorter than me, and I'm not tall, can be really stressful. So I think it's worth remembering that getting from A to B will take you much longer than it looks as though it will on a map. I usually estimate double. The first time I came to the Fringe after the Fringe, I was here 20 minutes early because I had set off in Fringe time. So walking from A to B is it'll take you longer than you expect, and it will be super, super busy. So
think about your route as well, because if you can avoid the stretch of the Royal Mile, this will make sense if you look on a map. But if you find the Fringe shop, which is on the Royal Mile and is venue number 1, I think, on the Fringe map. Venue 1.
Yeah, venue 1.
So on the Fringe map, if you find venue 1 and you are trying to get to a route that can avoid walking down that bit, it's amazingly fun if you've got older children potentially. But having walked along it myself with a 1-year-old, there's not a lot that a 1-year-old will take from it, and you'll be stressed out the whole way along it because it's very full on. And I definitely wouldn't try and do it with a buggy if you can avoid it. If you're a sling user and have a child who is slingable, I would advise you to go for a sling rather than a buggy if you can make that work in the city centre during August.
Well, the Fringe is much more centralised
Personal
these
choice.
days than it was in the 80s and 90s. It's really concentrated around the south side. But if you get out to the Botanics, there'll be a bit of Fringe stuff going on
You
there.
can
And
escape.
it'll feel like you can clear your head out there. It's
Yeah,
a
same
nice
with
place to be
Portobello,
kids.
But I would absolutely slings and reins, not buggies. I mean, I'm really thinking
If
that's
possible.
worthwhile,
I mean,
yeah.
obviously it's not always possible. I would also say we have quite a lot of information about access, and quite a lot of the information that is applicable to wheelchair users around the city, and the venue information we have would also be applicable with a buggy. So it is worth looking at that and thinking, I quite often do that if I'm going to a National Trust place or something, following the wheelchair accessible routes is ideal with a buggy because same rules apply in many cases. So it is worth having a look at some of that information for routes and things like that.
I'll just pop that in the live chat. There's about 15 or so minutes to go. What I just said.
That's Daniel's polite way of telling me to move on.
I have one more resource thing really quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Speaking about last year, there's a very good Facebook page for parents who are coming up to the Fringe. A really good forum started last year, so I think it's called Parents at the Fringe. It's worth getting onto that, and it's great. There's some really good tips. I mean, for example, eating breakfast last year during the Fringe, I saw one woman who was coming up just for a day to buy work who wasn't bringing her baby but was panicking about where she could express, so she was asking on the sort of forum if there was anywhere, and I popped on telling her she was welcome to come and use my desk at Fringe Central, but if that wasn't quite private enough, what about John Lewis? So it made us think that actually that's a very good resource as a Facebook page, but also we have this year on our maps, we have included 3 sites where we know for a fact there are private breastfeeding facilities. One is Fringe Central, we're going to create a private space there. One is Or Expressing, either or, and one is John Lewis, which obviously we don't control, but I suspect you would have been in John
Top
Lewis at some
floor.
point. It's great on the top floor. Lift
And you can
accessible,
charge your
it's
phone and
brilliant.
get a cake.
And the third one is that EICC, who are one of our venues over on the west side of town, are creating a private space for feeding children. So they will be on the map, and it's just useful to know that you have those havens around the city. They're not the only ones, but they're being publicised by us.
And just speaking of Facebook, we also have an official Fringe Artists Facebook group, which is closed, so you can apply to join. You just need to pop in the name of your show and the venue you're performing at, and we'll let you into that. So it's also another great space to ask for advice, whether it's about parenting matters or anything it is. Any questions you have about performing at the Fringe.
That conversation we were just having, I think, is a great crossover to advice we would give all the time, which is actually, if you've never been to Edinburgh before, or you've never been to Edinburgh in August before, planning in that time to get your bearings is really important. Just to bed in and feel comfortable, because it can almost be like a culture shock. It can be like going to a foreign country, just being like, oh, this is really busy and really intense. But actually, once you learn what Rachel was saying, once you learn your routes and learn your timings for going to places, it can get much easier. So actually, planning in that time, if you're here a day before your show, if you've got that luxury, and you can actually just have a wander about and kind of get your lay of the land.
There's one other thing which is, I don't think fits into the conversations we've got coming up for the end, but is important. Someone was pointing out, we have the main hospital in Edinburgh is called the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary and is on the outskirts of the town, of the city. That is not where, and this information is relevant as of August 2019, because if you listen to it after that, the hospital will have moved. But currently, the hospital for children in Edinburgh is in the centre of town on the other side of the meadows. It's called the Royal Hospital for Sick Kids. So if you do have an emergency, or if you do need your child to be seen by a doctor, I think it's up to the age of 16, isn't it, sick kids?
Yeah.
Over the age of 16, you do need to go to the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. Up to the age of 16, you need to go to the Sick Kids Hospital, which is on the Meadows, which is really important because they're in different places. And it doesn't really fit later, but it's really important information.
The one thing I would qualify that with is that Sick Kids is for emergencies. That's the A&E. If you need an out of hours doctor's appointment, then you have to phone up and go to. They will send you to the out of town hospital.
And the information for how to find that number to phone up is at the back of the Fringe Central programme. So that's in there.
Great. So onwards to it's one of our last topics before we do general top tips, but kind of an idea of wishful thinking, blue sky thinking, looking ahead. Money's no object. What do you guys as parents think are the things that the Fringe Society could look to do, or we as like a community could look towards doing to make things easier for parents, make them work?
Well, I think a Montessori nursery all day and a Norland nanny every night for every performance.
That's just for you.
So they get the lovely, lovely, lovely creativeness and then a bedtime.
I mean, I'm all about that. I think definitely I'm signing up.
You worked out a budget for that.
Yeah,
And money's no object.
we've got
Money's the object. Money's the object.
I think as well there's something about accommodation, just
Yeah.
knowing where you can find accommodation. So if you are travelling, you know, if you're, God love her, your mum or your dad are travelling with you and they're going to be the childcare, then knowing where you can get accommodation that you're not going to just freak out every time your child touches something. And just knowing where that is, where there's a bit of space and all of those sorts of things, but you're kind of, you know, I think understanding that around accommodation, and also knowing what shows you can go and see. I mean, I know we can read the brochure, but knowing what you could take kids into as an adult, or if things got, you know.
There's a babes and arm policy that applies to quite a lot of shows, but I think it's every year, being honest, it's an incredibly complicated area of the programme to pull through and make work and make clear what we're asking people at the point of registration. Alan, who manages registration with another hat, every year it's a challenge to make sure that information is robust, but we're working on getting it better.
It's something I've noted with my programme hat on, I guess. It's something that we're also getting more people request about. So there are examples, I don't think I can get them because they're not quite on sale yet, but there are examples of people who are asking us to list like a adult and baby performance, so that that's not strictly, which used to I think be very much in the children's section of the programme, whereas actually there's a bit of a, like I know Amelia did it in London, of that, letting people know that actually this is adult theatre work, however we're doing a specific performance, like
when they
cinema.
don't mind that you've got kids in babes in arms, because I remember taking my daughter to a babes in arms and I was like, I don't think they really want me to be here. It just says on my ticket I'm allowed to take her in, and the sweet girl at the door was like, okay. But I was like, I caught the eye of one of the performances, like, she does not want me to be here. Like, and the full terror of then having to deal with that is horrible.
So that's like the messaging about it, isn't it?
And keeping my programme hat on, and this is something when I spoke to Lindsay, who works in our access team, when she talks about access, she's like, people, it's like they want to be seen as more accessible, so they may say things that they don't necessarily mean. So actually, if your show doesn't work for babes in arms, I think it's more useful to a parent if you go, no babies allowed.
Not suitable for children under.
Yeah.
You know, and be realistic with you're not suitable for children under, and you know your own child or children, and you know what they're able to cope with. So the more rationale you can give for not suitable for children under is also helpful in trying to work out what to go to.
I think the accommodation thing, just flipping it to think about rather than audiences, how we support people who are participating and performing. I think the accommodation one is a really big one. We've done a lot of work at the Fringe Society over the last year about trying to expand the offer of accommodation, to try and, you know, diversify that offer, and particularly to lobby for available accommodation for participants that fall within what we view to be an affordable bracket. And I've talked a bit actually already to PIPA about how we add a layer about family-friendly accommodation into that, and how we make sure that the portals that we're working with have a way of making clear when family-friendly accommodation is family-friendly and when it isn't. Because I think accommodation generally is one of the biggest challenges for people coming to the Fringe, and I know from the parents I've spoken to who are performers participating. I met a lovely couple from Australia last year who were here with their little boy, and the accommodation was a big challenge for them. Finding a space that feels like an appropriate place to have your toddler, if it's a toddler, particularly smaller children, I guess, for the entire of August, that is also not going to completely break the bank is a challenge. And I think there is work for us to do, and I'm just noting here that we're thinking about it around more family-friendly accommodation listings that fall within that affordable price bracket. Because if money's no object, you can probably find something fairly easily. But actually,
I guess accommodation close
that's
to outdoor
something
space,
Yeah.
like that, a communal garden.
And that may be something to consider.
or not
is
miles
where-
away, so you can pop back and then maybe even come in again. And
Yeah, I mean, looking at bus routes before, you know, and thinking about, because Edinburgh does have pretty good buses, to be fair, and where could you perhaps say that might not be quite as expensive, that is still accessible for you, accessible enough for you, so that you and whoever you've got looking after your child, on the basis that it's not going to be you, in all honesty, can be skipping about to the local park whilst you are in the centre.
Do you know what, that's another thing in Fringe Central, which sometimes I don't think we emphasise enough of sometimes. Like, there's all these great events and things you can go to, but actually, it's also a place where you can just come and exist. Like, so if your accommodation is further out of town,
And you want a base.
yeah, you just want somewhere to be like, do you know what, I've got like 2 hours to kill before my show, and I can't bear the thought of going all the way back to my accommodation to then come back. That's what Fringe Central's for.
And we did it last year. There were a couple of families who used it a lot like that. This Australian couple who had this very sweet little boy, and there was another baby who, I mean, there were photos of him behind the front desk at Fringe Central, and it was like they had a picture of him with hearts drawn all over it. I mean, he was adored by the Fringe Central team. There is a group of very willing, I'm not going to say nannies because you're not allowed to actually use them as that, but people who are supportive and helpful will help you find what you need, and sofas where you can sit, and you're very, very welcome. That's the point of it.
Great.
They will cry when you leave, but there were genuine tears last year.
So moving on to kind of like the end of the discussion before we just leave with our contact details so you can get in touch with anything, I just wondered if we could go down the panel and just sort of say one piece of advice or top tips that kind of you wish someone had told you. So we're starting down with you, Ben.
Fringe specific, maybe.
I think what I think it is actually is, I'm just to reiterate what something that Jude said, which is that you can be good enough, because in the arts you've got to be excellent, haven't you? It's like that's the pressure to be, and I think taking some of that pressure off to be, do the best you can in your work and do the best you can with your kid, but you don't have to be a superhero on both, and that's not just Fringe specific; it's life specific, I think.
I think I would reiterate to be kind to yourself, because you won't be able to be good at your work or good with your parenting if you're beating yourself up all the time. So try and just take some space, take some time, take a breath. If you can find a moment to be on your own, even if that is walking around a supermarket, as it frequently is as a parent, and you think, oh my God, has this become my life? I am enjoying time on my own in a supermarket. Take that. It's really important.
I mean, all of that, and sort of what I said earlier about, it is going to be different, and don't be surprised by that. But my bit of advice for coming to the Fringe is you probably don't need as much stuff as you think you do.
That's parenting.
You don't need to bring everything. Like, you don't, your child does not need its special cutlery. I mean, unless it won't eat without it, maybe bring it. But I just always laugh particularly when I see my family members arriving and they've literally got like plates and stuff in their suitcase, and you're like, you just,
we eat off.
Be real. Yeah, like, be strict with yourself. You probably don't need that special chair it sits on at home. You don't,
Tot seats.
We have knives and forks and plates in Scotland.
We have knives and forks and plates in Scotland. We have lots of places you can borrow stuff. You can actually borrow stuff from libraries sometimes as well. Like, there certainly used to do that in Dundee. I think
there's a wooden toy collective here that you can borrow toys from.
Yeah. Like, you can go to the library.
Plastic.
Yeah. You can, you can borrow books, all of those sorts of things. That you don't need to bring everything. You can buy nappies when you're here. It's like all of that stuff can be done, and it's like you don't need everything.
I'm going south tomorrow to see family members, and I'm going to hurry home and unpack at least one suitcase on the basis of Jemima's advice. They have nappies in Reading.
See?
I'm not even joking, I've actually packed the plate.
We go mad.
This is the person with the youngest child learning in the room. I'm not even joking. My advice would be that the Fringe is an overwhelming place, but it is not an impossible place to be at as a participant if you have a family, and the Fringe Society really are committed to trying to help with that. So this obviously has been 50 minutes of us gassing. I hope it's been useful, but even if it's made you realise there are more things you want to know that we haven't covered in any way, shape or form, talk to us. And I think the creches, particularly the coffee breaks around the creches, I'd really encourage you, if you are a parent and you've made that decision and you brought yourself and your family to the Fringe, come in and just see us. We'll be there, and various of us at various times. And even if you just need a bit of a chin wag and a bit of advice, people will be there to give that. And you're very welcome to message us at any point asking for more help.
What's really nice from my point of view is actually all of those bits of advice actually kind of work. Just for coming to the Fringe in general, like, be kind to yourself, bring less stuff than you think you need. It's all that thing of being able to take a step back and actually just be like, escape the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess that's us. I'm going to move on the slide so as people can see all of our details on screen for people to get in touch with us. I just realised I didn't update the email from yesterday.
Media are going to really welcome these emails.
Media advice are going to love that, but that's not. It should be participants@edfringe.com. So that's.
I mean, you can try media advice. I'm quite interested to see what they say back.
We are very good at forwarding emails on.
I will say our lovely colleague Amy is a mother, so she'll probably be very understanding when she passes your email on to the right place, which is participants@edfringe.com. All I really would like to say is a massive thank you to everyone for joining us today. This has generally been a really great chat, and as someone who's not a parent, I found it useful, so I imagine it's going to be a really great resource for everyone else. Dan, does you want to quick plug for what we have coming up?
Sure. So it depends if you're watching us live. We have more sessions coming up later this month, but we'll always have some FringeCasts in the pipeline along the way. So I'm just going to pop in a link with more information on how you can book for future sessions. This year we've got sessions on how to talk to the media, ranging from that to managing your mental health at the Fringe, and lots of others that have eluded my memory at this moment.
The mental health and wellbeing one is one I'm really excited about. We're doing it a month out, so July the 2nd, and kind of throughout the day we're just going to give you those tools. It shouldn't be something that seems a bit scary, just generally tools for looking after yourself and making sure that you're in a good place in order that your work also be in a good place too.
And if you're catching up with the session in a year's time, if you go to the information sessions page, you can catch all the recordings of every FringeCast we've ever done. So you'll definitely find something that will help you.
It's not scary at all to know that they're that
They're
permanent.
all there. Everything we've just said will be there forever.
Cool. So on behalf of everyone, I just want to say a massive thank you for joining us today, and have a great Fringe.
Bye.
Bye.